Okay, Rob Kall radio show, WNJC 1360, the Rob Kall Bottom Up radio show, and we're talking with...
Howard Wooldridge of Fort Worth, Texas.
And you're with what organization?
LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition.
And what are you here to talk about?
I'm here to talk about the absolute failure of the war on drugs, or modern prohibition, and why we can make America a land without any drug dealers. We could cut our crime in half. We could stop funding terrorism. And then my profession, law enforcement, could do a much better job of arresting drunk drivers, child molesters, and people flying airplanes into buildings if we stop chasing the Michael Phelpses and Rush Limbaughs and Willie Nelsons of the world.
But how do your fellow policemen feel about this?
You know, I rode my horse across America a couple of years ago, and when I meet these deputies and other officers out in the middle of nowhere, 60% would legalize, regulate, tax marijuana tomorrow. But at this police station, of course, they uniformly say, no, legalizing is a bad idea. There's a public face, but a private voice.
Very interesting. So how do you make that private voice make a difference?
Well, LEAP was founded 7 years ago with 5 of us, and we're now up to 11,000. There is safety in numbers. We're now having more and more active duty officers come out in support of this, especially in New Hampshire. Some major corrections officers and police officers are coming out and saying what most of us who are retired have been saying for years. We need to end this disastrous, dysfunctional policy called war on drugs and legalize, regulate, and tax these dangerous drugs.
You're saying that you have 11,000 police?
11,000 police, judges, prosecutors, DEA, FBI, and our supporters. That's true.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we expect to see next? It looks like New Jersey's making some changes in their rules. Is it moved first towards medicinal marijuana, and then is it just marijuana you're talking about?
Oh no, I'm talking about all drugs. Until the last dangerous drug is sold in a state ABC store, 14-year-olds will continue to join a gang, sell it off sidewalks, and get killed in the process. Save our children. We must legalize and regulate these drugs.
We're talking about heroin and crack?
Yes. For our experience in law enforcement, no drug is worse than alcohol by its use. And you eliminate the crime and the violence when you sell these drugs for $2 a day out of a state ABC store. Legalization is all about ending the crime and violence like we had with Al Capone back in the 30s, and now we see with the Mexican problem, etc., across America. All these threats, all these problems go away, and then we're left with only the problem of drug use and drug abuse.
Who are your opponents?
Number one on Capitol Hill, where I work, is law enforcement. For my profession, this is a $72 billion a year jobs program. We know that since prohibition causes 70-75% of felony crime, without this prohibition, detectives are going to get laid off. Prison guards will lose their jobs quickly because the prisons are full of these people there because of drug prohibition. So my profession fights me tooth and nail because it's simply straightforward a jobs program, good overtime.
What do you do? How do you see any progress in this?
Well, we're seeing great progress both here at CPAC and on Capitol Hill because we're trying to get a policy based on individual liberty, personal responsibility, property rights. Limited government means leave us alone. As Governor Norquist would say, cost-effective government. We've wasted a trillion tax dollars for no gain so far, and of course, states' rights. Like alcohol, like gambling, this should be a states' rights issue. And so on Capitol Hill, I'm actually getting good progress with true conservatives who believe in those 6 principles.
How about on the Democratic side?
Democratic side is good, but they're more of a kinder, gentler drug war. You know, more of a harm reduction, which is all good, but we need to kill the beast. We need to end this cancer called modern prohibition.
So you mentioned Grover Norquist. Have you spoken to him?
I have spoken to him.
What's he say?
I've been to his Wednesday morning brunch group. He let me have 3 minutes. And I think Grover is on my side, but he won't quite say so publicly because, as you know, this is absolute third rail topic. And but I believe down in his heart that since he gave me those 3 minutes, he really would like to have a dialogue on this, air it out, explain to America why a legal, regulated approach is preferable to today's selling off sidewalks by teenagers.
Well, you just said it's a $70 billion business. What would be the financial, economic side of this if it was legalized?
If we ended all prohibition, it would inject about $200 billion each year into the economy. We'd save $72 billion we spend on law enforcement, chasing the Michael Phelpses. We spend about $110 billion on illegal drugs. Most of this money goes to Mexico, Canada, Colombia. That money would stay in the economy so we could buy more Detroit cars, more Florida vacations, and simply a trip down to Applebee's to have a nice steak dinner. This would inject $100 billion, and then we could, as a sin tax, at $1 a dose, we'd make about $10 billion, which isn't going to solve the debt, but it's a nice chunk of change. And last but not least, we could have Americans now with criminal records for drugs. If that was lifted, they could be all they could be. Like a nurse who got arrested for simple possession, who can't work as a nurse now, then she could go back to being a nurse once we said, you know what, there's nothing worse, marijuana is not worse than alcohol, and you don't lose your job as a nurse if you're convicted of an alcohol offense.
How about internationally? I mean, we're talking about the crop in Afghanistan funding much of the opposition.
Exactly. Our troops today, according to the Army War College report that came out 2 years ago, 70% of Al-Qaeda, Taliban operating budget is provided by the drug trade. This is a disservice to the men and women fighting and dying for our liberty in Afghanistan, that 7 of 10 are killed with bullets bought by drug money. And that doesn't have to happen. Absent prohibition, that funding source for Taliban goes to zero. Why would that be so bad?
Sounds like a good thing to me. It's Rob Kall, Bottom Up Radio Show, WNJC 1360, talking to Howard Cowboy Wooldridge, a retired
police detective from Fort Worth.
Calling for legalization of all drugs.
All drugs.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.